The wine glass caught the light as my mother stood up at the head of the table. 23 family members fell silent, forks pausing mid-air, conversations dying. I felt my stomach drop. I knew that look on her face. That practiced expression of concern that barely masked her contempt. She cleared her throat, scanning the room before her eyes landed on me like a spotlight I never wanted. "Before we say grace," she announced, her voice carrying across the dining room, "I think we should address something that's been weighing on my heart." My fingers tightened around my napkin. My cousin Amber exchanged glances with her husband across the table. Uncle Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Everyone knew what was coming. My mother took a long sip of her Chardonnay, savoring the moment. "My daughter Victoria is 33 years old, and she still hasn't done anything meaningful with her life." The words hit me like physical blows. My face burned. My throat constricted. Around the table, some people looked down at their plates. Others watched with barely concealed curiosity, waiting to see how I would react. I said nothing. I just sat there, feeling the weight of their judgment pressing down on me like I was drowning in front of everyone. That's when my phone started ringing. The ringtone cut through the silence like a knife. I fumbled for my phone in my purse, my hands shaking from adrenaline and humiliation. My mother's expression shifted to annoyance. She hated being interrupted. I glanced at the screen, expecting it to be a spam call or maybe my friend Kelsey checking if I'd survived dinner yet. Instead, I saw an unfamiliar number with a Washington, D.C. area code. My finger hovered over the decline button. I should let it go to voicemail. But something made me pause. That morning, I'd received an encrypted email asking me to keep my phone on today. I'd thought it was spam. Now I wasn't so sure. My mother cleared her throat impatiently. "Victoria, we're in the middle of something important here." I answered the call and brought it to my ear. The voice on the other end was crisp and professional. "Ms. Victoria Brennan? This is Sandra Mitchell calling from the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. We've been trying to reach you regarding your cybersecurity framework proposal." The room seemed to tilt sideways. My mother's face froze mid-expression. Around the table, people leaned forward, straining to hear. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Yes, this is Victoria. I've been expecting your call." My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I walked away from the table, phone pressed to my ear, feeling 23 pairs of eyes following me as I headed toward the kitchen. Sandra Mitchell's voice continued, calm and matter-of-fact, explaining that the Department of Defense had reviewed my quantum encryption protocols and wanted to discuss implementation timelines. My hand trembled as I gripped the countertop for support. "We'd like you to attend a briefing next Tuesday," Sandra said. "The Secretary is very interested in your work on blockchain integration for national security infrastructure. Can you confirm your availability?" I glanced back through the doorway. My mother had sat down heavily in her chair. My father was whispering something to her, his face confused. My brother Tyler watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Yes," I managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. "Tuesday works perfectly for me." Sandra went through some preliminary details about security clearances and confidentiality agreements. I responded automatically, my mind still reeling. When the call ended, I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, staring at my phone. The device that had just changed everything. Through the doorway, I could hear urgent whispers starting up around the dinner table. I took a deep breath and walked back into the dining room. Nobody was eating anymore. They were all waiting, watching me take my seat with new eyes. Eyes that saw something different now. My mother recovered first, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well," she said brightly, too brightly, that sounded important. I set my phone face down on the table next to my plate. My mashed potatoes had gone cold. It was. Aunt Patricia, always the boldest one in the family, leaned forward. Was that really the White House? I nodded slowly. The silence that followed was different from before. Not judgmental this time. Confused. Uncertain. My mother tried to regain control of the narrative. I'm sure it's just some sort of survey or study group thing. The government calls lots of people. My brother Tyler spoke up for the first time all evening. Mom, they said Department of Defense. And quantum encryption. He looked at me with something that might have been respect. What exactly have you been working on, Victoria? I picked up my fork and took a bite of cold turkey. Let them wonder. Let them scramble to rewrite their assumptions about me. For years, I'd tried to explain my work to them. They'd never listened. They'd dismissed my computer science degree as impractical. Called my late nights coding a waste of time. Suggested I get a real job with benefits and a retirement plan. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of awkward conversation and sidelong glances. My mother kept trying to steer discussions back to safe topics, her usual territory where she controlled the narrative. But everything felt different now. That phone call had shifted something fundamental. When dessert came around, my cousin Amber cornered me in the kitchen while I was refilling my water glass. Okay, seriously, she whispered, glancing back toward the dining room. What's going on? Are you actually working with the government? I considered how much to tell her. Amber had always been kind to me, even when the rest of the family wrote me off as the disappointment. I've been developing cybersecurity protocols for the past 3 years. Started as a side project while I was working freelance. Some people noticed. Amber's eyes widened. Some people at the White House noticed? I shrugged, trying to appear casual even though my heart was still racing. Among other places. She hugged me suddenly, fiercely. I always knew you were doing something important, she whispered. Even when everyone else couldn't see it. The words brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I blinked them back quickly. When we returned to the dining room, my mother was holding court again, but her usual confidence seemed forced. Brittle. The drive home that night felt surreal. My older sister Melanie had offered me a ride, and we sat in silence for the first 10 minutes while Christmas lights blurred past the windows. Finally, she spoke. You could have told us. I turned to look at her profile, illuminated by the dashboard lights. Told you what? That you were working on something big. Something government-level important. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Would you have listened? Any of you? Melanie's hands tightened on the steering wheel. That's not fair. Isn't it? How many times did I try to explain my projects? How many family dinners did Mom spend asking when I was going to get a normal job? When I was going to give her grandchildren like you did? When I was going to stop wasting my life? The words came out harsher than I intended, but they were true. Melanie pulled up to my apartment building and put the car in park. For what it's worth, she said quietly, not looking at me, I'm sorry. We should have paid more attention. I grabbed my purse and opened the door. Yeah. You should have. Inside my apartment, I collapsed on my couch and finally let myself process what had happened. The humiliation. The phone call. The look on my mother's face. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I kept replaying the dinner in my mind, analyzing every moment like I was debugging code. My mother's cruel words. The silence of the family. That pivotal phone call. I'd been working toward this opportunity for 3 years, building my reputation quietly in specialized tech circles where innovation mattered more than family approval. My journey had started with a white paper on quantum-resistant cryptography that I'd published under a pseudonym. I'd wanted my work judged on merit, not dismissed because I was some nobody from a small town in Ohio. The paper caught attention in security communities. Led to consulting work. Which led to bigger projects. My current framework for blockchain-integrated government communications had been my passion project, something I'd poured countless late nights into while my family assumed I was just playing on my computer. At 2 in the morning, I opened my laptop and reviewed the encrypted files I'd been working on. The framework wasn't just about security. It was about creating unhackable communication channels for critical infrastructure. Power grids. Financial systems. Emergency services. If implemented correctly, my protocols could protect millions of people from cyberterrorism. But I'd never told my family any of this. How could I, when they'd already decided I was wasting my life? Tuesday morning arrived with freezing rain and heavy traffic. I stood in front of my closet for 20 minutes trying to decide what someone wore to a White House briefing. Professional but not trying too hard. Confident but respectful. I settled on a navy suit and simple jewelry. My reflection in the mirror showed a woman I barely recognized. Nervous but determined. The flight to Washington felt endless. I spent it reviewing my presentation notes and trying not to think about my mother's face at dinner. Sandra Mitchell met me at security, a sharp woman in her 50s with silver hair and kind eyes. Ms. Brennan, thank you for coming on short notice. Secretary Howard is very eager to discuss your framework. She walked me through corridors I'd only seen in movies and news broadcasts. Historic portraits lined the walls. My footsteps echoed on marble floors. This was real. This was actually happening. The briefing room held 6 people, including a 4-star general whose chest was covered in medals. They listened intently as I explained my quantum encryption protocols, asking sharp technical questions that showed they actually understood the work. For 2 hours, we discussed implementation strategies, security concerns, and potential applications. Nobody interrupted me to ask when I was getting married. Nobody suggested this was just a hobby I'd outgrow. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises of follow-up communications. As Sandra walked me back through security, she smiled. That went extremely well. The secretary rarely sits through entire technical briefings, but he stayed for your whole presentation. Pride swelled in my chest, warm and unfamiliar. When had anyone last made me feel capable? Valued? On the flight home, I drafted an email to my primary contact at the Department of Defense, outlining next steps. My phone buzzed with texts. 3 from my brother Tyler asking how the meeting went. 2 from Amber wanting details. 1 from my father that just said, "Proud of you, sweetheart." Nothing from my mother. I wasn't surprised. That evening, I treated myself to expensive takeout and allowed myself to feel satisfied. Not just with the meeting, but with the years of work that had led to it. The late nights. The rejected proposals. The moments of doubt when I'd wondered if my mother was right, if I was wasting my time. All of it had been worth something after all. My phone rang again. Tyler. I answered. So? How'd it go? I smiled, settling into my couch with pad thai. They want to move forward. Implementation could start as early as next spring. Word spread through my family faster than I expected. By Thursday, my inbox had messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Cousins wanting to congratulate me. Aunts expressing their pride. Even my Uncle Marcus, who'd once told me to stop wasting time on computers and learn something practical, sent a rambling email about how he'd always believed in me. The hypocrisy should have made me angry. Instead, I felt nothing. Just a hollow sort of vindication. My mother remained silent, which spoke louder than any email could have. At my weekly coffee date with Kelsey, my best friend since college, I finally unpacked everything. She can't admit she was wrong, I said, stirring my latte mechanically. That would mean acknowledging she spent years tearing me down for no reason. Kelsey, ever practical, shrugged. So don't wait for her acknowledgement. You've already proven yourself to the people who actually matter. The ones with the power to change national security infrastructure. She had a point. But there was still that part of me, the daughter who remembered being small, who wanted her mother to be proud. To say those words she'd never said. Kelsey squeezed my hand across the table. You know what the best revenge is? Success. And you've got that in spades. January brought a new contract and more meetings in Washington. My framework was being tested on small-scale systems with promising results. The Department of Defense wanted to expand implementation. I hired a lawyer to review contracts and negotiate terms. For the first time in my life, I needed professional representation for legitimate business dealings. The irony wasn't lost on me. My mother finally called on a Sunday afternoon. I almost didn't answer. Victoria, she said when I picked up, her voice strained. We need to talk about what happened at Christmas. I waited, letting the silence stretch. She continued, you embarrassed me. Making that call seem like such a big production in front of everyone. My jaw clenched. Of course. Of course she'd found a way to make this about her hurt feelings. I embarrassed you? I kept my voice level. You called me a failure in front of the entire family, Mom. But sure, me answering a work call was the real problem. She huffed. I was concerned about your future. That's what mothers do. And you've always been so sensitive about everything. I ended the call after 5 more minutes of her explaining why her cruelty had actually been loving concern. My hands shook with anger. But beneath the anger was something else. Clarity. I'd spent 33 years trying to earn her approval, twisting myself into shapes that might finally make her proud. It had never worked. It never would. Because the problem wasn't me. That realization changed something fundamental. I stopped checking my phone hoping for her texts. Stopped mentally rehearsing explanations of my work that might make her understand. Stopped caring whether she approved. The next family event was my niece's birthday party in February. I almost didn't go. But Melanie called and asked me to come, and I'd always had a soft spot for little Sophie. I showed up with a gift and prepared responses for any awkward questions. My mother greeted me at the door with a tight smile. Victoria. I didn't know if you'd come. I stepped past her into the warmth of Melanie's house. I'm here for Sophie. The party was easier than expected. Kids running around, parents chatting about school districts and soccer schedules. Normal family chaos. My mother tried to corner me twice, but I stayed mobile, always engaged in another conversation. Tyler found me in the kitchen refilling my drink. She's freaking out, you know, Tyler said, leaning against the counter. Mom. She's been telling everyone you're being difficult and ungrateful. I took a long drink of water. And what do you think? He shrugged. I think she said something cruel and got caught. Now she's scrambling because you're not playing your usual role of apologizing for existing. His bluntness surprised me. Tyler had always been the golden child, the successful lawyer who made the right choices. When did you get so perceptive? I asked. He grinned. I've been watching you for years, Victoria. Watching Mom tear you down every time you tried to share your work. I should have said something sooner. I'm saying it now. You don't owe her anything. The validation from my brother, unexpected and genuine, nearly undid me. We talked for another hour while the party continued around us. He told me about his own struggles with our mother's expectations, the pressure to be perfect, the exhaustion of always performing. By the time I left, something had shifted between us. We weren't just siblings anymore. We were allies. March brought an unexpected development. A major tech company reached out about acquiring licensing rights to my encryption protocols for commercial applications. The offer was substantial. Life-changing. I spent a week consulting with lawyers and industry experts before deciding to accept. The contract included provisions that protected government implementation while allowing private sector innovation. When the deal was finalized, I transferred a significant portion to savings and investments. The rest went towards something I'd been dreaming about for years, my own company. Brennan Security Solutions launched quietly with me as founder and CEO. We specialized in customized cybersecurity frameworks for organizations that couldn't afford to be hacked. Hospitals, schools, small municipalities. I hired a small team of talented developers I'd worked with over the years. We rented office space in a renovated warehouse downtown. For the first time, I had business cards that said CEO instead of freelance consultant. My calendar filled with meetings and project deadlines. I worked longer hours than ever before, but it felt different. This was mine. Nobody could diminish it or dismiss it or tell me I was wasting my time. Family news traveled through group texts and social media. I learned about births and promotions and achievements through digital updates rather than phone calls. My mother continued her pattern of posting vague, martyred messages about ungrateful children. I stopped reading them. Life moved forward without her approval, and I discovered I didn't need it after all. In April, I was invited to speak at a cybersecurity conference in Chicago. The audience included industry leaders, government officials, and academics. I talked about quantum-resistant encryption and the future of digital security. The applause was genuine and sustained. Afterward, people lined up to exchange business cards and discuss potential collaborations. This was validation that mattered. Not family approval, but professional respect from people who understood the work. A woman approached me as the crowd thinned. She was older, maybe 60, with sharp eyes and an air of authority. Ms. Brennan, I'm Dr. Patricia Vance from MIT's Computer Science Department. That was an impressive presentation. We talked for 30 minutes about research opportunities and potential partnerships. Before leaving, she handed me her card. We should discuss a guest lecture series. Our students would benefit from your perspective. May arrived with blooming flowers and a family crisis that reached me through Tyler's phone call. Dad had a heart attack. He's stable now, but Mom's falling apart. Can you come to the hospital? I drove there with conflicting emotions churning in my stomach. My father had always been quieter than my mother, letting her dominate family dynamics. But he'd also been kind in small ways. The parent who remembered my birthday without being reminded. Who asked about my work even when he didn't fully understand it. At the hospital, my mother looked smaller somehow. Diminished by fear. She glanced up when I entered the waiting room, her expression cycling through relief, resentment, and something that might have been shame. Victoria. You came. My father's recovery took weeks. I visited regularly, sitting by his bedside while he slept or watching television with him during waking hours. We didn't talk about Christmas dinner or my mother's cruelty. We talked about hospital food and baseball scores and nothing important. But something unspoken passed between us. An understanding. My mother tried to use the crisis as an olive branch. She called one evening while I was leaving the hospital. I know we've had our difficulties, Victoria. But family is what matters in times like these. I stopped walking, standing in the parking garage under harsh fluorescent lights. You're right, Mom. Family does matter. That's why what you said at Christmas hurt so much. She was quiet for a long moment. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. You stood up in front of everyone and called me a failure. You've been doing it in smaller ways for years. And now Dad's sick, so I'm supposed to forget about it and pretend we're fine? Her voice turned defensive. I'm under a lot of stress right now. So am I, running a company while worrying about Dad while processing years of your criticism. But I'm here anyway because I love him. You don't get points for basic decency during a crisis. I ended the call before she could respond. My hands were shaking again, but this time from standing my ground instead of absorbing her deflection. Growth felt uncomfortable. Necessary. June brought my father's discharge from the hospital and a tentative family dinner to celebrate his recovery. I almost declined the invitation. But Melanie called personally. He asked for you specifically, Victoria. Please come. The dinner was smaller this time. Just immediate family. The dining room that had witnessed my humiliation now held a more subdued gathering. My father looked thinner but smiled when he saw me. My mother had clearly been coached. She was polite. Reserved. We talked about safe topics, my father's physical therapy, Tyler's latest case, Melanie's promotion at work. When dessert came around, my father cleared his throat. I want to say something. We all turned to him. He looked directly at me. Victoria, I'm sorry I didn't defend you at Christmas. Your mother was wrong to say those things. You've built something remarkable, and we should have recognized that years ago. The words hung in the air. My mother's face went rigid. Melanie and Tyler both nodded agreement. I felt tears prickling my eyes but refused to let them fall. Thank you, Dad. That means more than you know. My mother stood abruptly and left the table. We heard her footsteps climbing the stairs to the bedroom. Nobody followed her. For once, she wasn't the center of attention. My father's health scare had shifted dynamics in ways I didn't fully understand yet. July brought expansion for my company. We hired 3 more developers and moved to larger office space. The government contracts were progressing smoothly. Commercial clients sought us out based on reputation. I appeared in industry publications, gave interviews about cybersecurity trends, built a professional profile that existed entirely separate from my family name. My mother and I reached an uneasy détente. We didn't discuss Christmas or her cruel words. We exchanged occasional texts about my father's health and family logistics. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something closer to acceptance. She couldn't admit she'd been wrong. I couldn't pretend her words hadn't wounded me deeply. So we existed in the space between, cordial but distant. Tyler's wife hosted a 4th of July barbecue. Extended family attended, including relatives who'd witnessed my public humiliation 7 months earlier. The difference in how people treated me was striking. Now they wanted to hear about my company, my government work, my success. Some apologized for not taking my work seriously before. Others pretended they'd always believed in me. I smiled and accepted their words while remembering who had actually supported me when it mattered. August marked something unexpected. My mother called asking if we could meet for coffee. Just the 2 of us. I agreed, curious despite myself. We met at a neutral location downtown. She looked older than I remembered. More fragile. We ordered drinks and sat across from each other in uncomfortable silence until she finally spoke. I've been seeing a therapist, she said quietly. After your father's heart attack. She's been helping me understand some things about myself. I waited. I was jealous of you. The words came out rushed. At Christmas. Before that, really. You were doing something I never had the courage to do. Building something entirely your own. I convinced myself it wasn't real because accepting it was real meant accepting I'd wasted opportunities. My throat tightened. You called me a failure in front of everyone. I know. I was cruel. I wanted to hurt you because your success made me feel small. She looked down at her coffee. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth I've been avoiding. We talked for 2 hours. She didn't ask for forgiveness. Didn't expect me to absolve her immediately. Just explained the fear and insecurity that had driven her cruelty. Her own mother's impossible standards. The dreams she'd abandoned when she got married young. The resentment that had calcified over decades into something toxic. I listened, feeling layers of hurt and anger slowly shifting into something more complex. Understanding didn't erase the damage, but it provided context. Made her human instead of just the villain in my story. I need time, I told her as we were leaving. I can't just forget what you said and how you made me feel. She nodded. I understand. I just wanted you to know I'm working on it. On myself. We hugged briefly, awkwardly. Not reconciliation yet. But maybe the first step toward something healthier. On the drive home, I cried. Not from sadness exactly. From relief. From releasing expectations I'd carried for 33 years. My mother might never be the parent I'd needed her to be. But I could build a life that didn't require her approval to feel valid. September brought an invitation to the White House again. This time for a ceremony recognizing innovations in national security technology. My quantum encryption framework was being formally adopted across multiple government agencies. I stood in a room with other recipients, listening to speeches about innovation and service. My parents attended. My father beaming with pride. My mother quiet but present. When my name was called and I stepped forward to accept the recognition, I looked out at the audience and saw my family in the third row. Tyler giving me a thumbs up. Melanie wiping tears. My father clapping enthusiastically. My mother watching with an expression I couldn't quite read, but that wasn't cruel. The secretary shook my hand and thanked me for my contribution to national security. Cameras flashed. This moment that existed independent of family validation but was sweeter for having them witness it. The reception afterward felt surreal. Senators and tech executives and policymakers all wanting to discuss cybersecurity and innovation. I exchanged business cards and promised follow-up meetings while part of my brain still couldn't quite believe this was my life now. My father found me during a quiet moment. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. I'm sorry it took me so long to say it properly. I hugged him tightly. You said it when it mattered most. My mother approached hesitantly. Congratulations, Victoria. This is truly impressive. The words were simple but sincere. I saw the effort it cost her to say them. Thank you, Mom. We stood together awkwardly until Tyler rescued us with a joke about the fancy appetizers. Family dynamics hadn't transformed overnight. But small shifts were happening. Enough to build on. October arrived with falling leaves and a sense of seasons changing in more ways than one. My company secured a major contract with a healthcare network. We were protecting patient data for 15 hospitals across 3 states. The work was challenging and meaningful. Lives literally depended on systems staying secure. I hired more staff. Promoted my earliest developers to leadership positions. Built something sustainable. Family dinners became easier gradually. My mother and I maintained careful politeness. She attended therapy consistently. Sometimes she slipped into old patterns of criticism, then caught herself. Progress wasn't linear. But it was happening. I learned to set boundaries without anger. To walk away from conversations that became toxic. To protect the peace I'd built for myself. Thanksgiving approached with less anxiety than Christmas had brought. We gathered at Melanie's house again. My mother stayed mostly quiet, helping in the kitchen rather than holding court. When we sat down to eat, my father said grace. Thanked everyone for coming. Mentioned how grateful he was for family. For second chances. For the people we were becoming. My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand briefly. Not an apology. Not redemption. Just acknowledgement. I squeezed back. December came full circle. 1 year since that Christmas dinner that had changed everything. This time we gathered at my apartment, my choice to host in my own space. I'd furnished it nicely with earnings from my success. Art on the walls. Comfortable furniture. Evidence of the life I'd built. My family arrived with dishes and gifts and careful politeness. We ate without drama. Talked about safe topics and slowly, carefully, some deeper ones. My mother helped me clean up after dinner. We stood side by side at my sink, washing dishes in comfortable silence. I'm glad you called the White House back that night, she said quietly. Even though I was horrible. I'm glad you didn't let me stop you. I dried a plate carefully. I almost didn't answer. But you did. You always were braver than I gave you credit for. We finished the dishes together. Rejoined the family in the living room where Tyler was showing everyone photos of his new house. Normal family chaos. Imperfect but no longer toxic. I looked around at these people who'd hurt me and supported me in equal measure. Who'd doubted me until proof became impossible to ignore. Who were trying now, however imperfectly, to do better. The phone call that had interrupted my humiliation 1 year ago hadn't just changed my professional life. It had forced all of us to confront uncomfortable truths about judgment and worth and the cost of undermining the people we claimed to love. My mother would never be perfect. Neither would I. But maybe we could be real. Maybe that was enough. My phone buzzed with an email from the Department of Defense. New project proposal. Implementation timeline. Another opportunity to prove myself to people who mattered. I smiled and put the phone away. That could wait. Right now, I was exactly where I needed to be. Not seeking approval anymore. Just living my life on terms I'd earned. The best revenge really was success. But the sweetest part was learning I didn't need revenge at all. Just the freedom to become who I'd always been beneath their expectations.